and the continent at large. And with us in the studio, I have Mureithi Muito. Karibu sana.
Thanks for having me.
Very interesting times we're looking at. I mean, both records. I mean, Trump, if he becomes president, becomes the oldest person in the U.S. to ever take on that seat. Kamala Harris, if she wins the election, she becomes the first woman to hold the most powerful position in the world. So records, whichever way it goes, we are likely to see some records. How do you see this election that the Americans are basically deciding today? How do you see it going?
Thank you very much. According to most analysts, is that this year's election race is a close call for either. And so very hard to tell who's going to emerge the winner. Yes. Because each one of them is actually having a sizable chunk of voters that he's actually commandeered to his side or his favor or her favor. Looking at this dynamics taking shape in the U.S. elections, is that during the campaigns, not necessarily even depending on the opinion polls, although the opinion polls sometimes maybe having something credible to present to the people, although it's not something that you can rely upon. Indicates like Americans, the female vote, the American women and ladies would actually, majority of them are actually going for Kamala Harris. While Trump has tried as much to have the youth on his side. And I don't know how this is going to work for him because again his attitude might actually be detrimental, and even considering what he had in his last campaigns, the kind of language that he has had all along, and also his petty complaints over small things like a microphone, and takes him to an extent where he just pours some vulgar statements. He's somebody who might lose out in such areas. Secondly,
I've seen him having an important and for weird reason, African American men seem to trust Trump more than Kamala Harris.
More than Kamala Harris. I think, I don't know whether it's the African cultural thing that has actually gotten into the African men, but I think the lack of support, I mean, I wanted to feel, I almost felt like the African Americans are somewhat religious, somewhat. And Trump has not let that one go of his, stance. Yes. And his strong position for Israel and the church. Yes. That inclination, I think, endears him to some of the black people, save for the racial connotations that he has always, brought up that really explain his, his racism, whatever factor that he actually embraces, because he seems discriminative against especially African Americans, and also at some point people like us, Africans who have actually immigrated to America, he's called them animals. Actually, when a president refers to you as an animal, expect a treatment of an animal, and that person does not respect you. So whether he's speaking to Americans, any Kenyan or any African who has the potential to get to America by all legal means, like maybe the green card, and then that person is regarded as an animal, you can imagine where Donald Trump would be taking the US of A. Days when USA was a superpower and still is a superpower, I think they respected humanity at that time. But I think if Donald Trump takes that course, I think the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan mentality and mindset and such groupings might arise, because they will find a president who actually supports them. So I don't know how it's going to work out now in reality, let alone what is going with opinion polls, because opinion polls could be just paid just the way even in Kenya it happens. You just pay them up and compromise them, and they'll give you a report that is favorable. You see them changing faces every now and then, depending on which side outweighs the other in terms of how they negotiate their deals. So opinion polls is not something I would go for. They can say this so that they can crush or crumble the interest of, the performance of Kamala Harris, because watching it from various stations, you're getting different opinions. If you watch a station like maybe CNN, you will discover that they'll give you more of what has an inclination towards maybe Trump, because Trump and Kamala, but mostly they actually go for what the Republicans want, or actually are for, stand for.
Because I know Fox is outrightly Republican. And they will say everything, anything
but remember
about basically Trump
during his first reign. I think his greatest adversary from the fourth estate was actually Fox Media. So I don't know, maybe, but you see politics change with time. So you never know how it's going to work out. And that's what I'm saying. Opinion polls versus a reality on ground is different. That's why sometimes when you listen to analysts various analysts from that side, then you get to discover that the ground could be different when you do your evaluation,
How do you see the relationship between Kenya and the US if Trump becomes president? Because President William Ruto has been Joe Biden's almost blue-eyed boy, in the sense that last time when the president went to the US, I was even considered the greatest NATO supporter who's not part of NATO.
When the president was traveling to the US, we were seated here.
Yes.
And I said that he should be wary of being puppeteered by the Americans because of his stance for the Pan-Africanism, which is now losing tract.
He's basically vacated that position.
They caused him to vacate. Otherwise, he was very strong. Now, the trust I think African nations have on him giving any speech, it sounds just like another Odi. And he had already created for himself, a platform which had actually earned him great respect. But after the American trip, things changed, because when you seemed like kind of puppeteered.
Yes.
Remember that time when we were watching him be sitting on that White House seat,
yes,
rotated by Joe Biden.
Yes.
It could be friendship, but again, I didn't understand. I couldn't understand, or most people didn't understand really why he even had to sit on that seat and feel like an American president. That was a bad statement coming out. And I do feel that he has to be very strong. He has to develop thick skin and strong shoulders to carry the interest of Kenyans if Donald Trump becomes the president. Because Donald Trump is bullish. And you remember when we had the Kenya being a hotbed of politics, you know what he had said. It was not really praising Kenyans, but he was demeaning Kenyans. So his demeanor is what really Kenyans might be fighting with, because he has no respect for the people he deems as minnows to him. So I don't know. And that's why I'm saying the president, Donald Trump, if he becomes president this second time, I think it's going to be tough, especially on African countries, because remember the criticism that was there against the Democrats is that they had subjected Americans to a negotiating nation, yet theirs was to impose. Gone are days like when we used to have just an ambassador bullying our president. Smith Hemston. We thought it was the order of the day, but we were being belittled. And we were despised to that level, that an ambassador would actually exercise such power, enormous power. We allowed it that time. And I think it's time the president becomes tough to protect the interest of the people of Kenya. Because
Well,
if Donald Trump becomes, there is nothing like a negotiation. It is imposition and imposition upon imposition. And that's not going to be good for Kenyans.
What about his position when it comes to the war in Ukraine? Because anytime I prefer Trump 1,000 times. Because when Democrats come, one of the things they start pushing down people's throats is you know, this LGBTQ agenda. You remember when Barack Obama, who, if you ask me, was the worst thing that ever happened to the world, pushing that agenda into African countries and connecting it with aid. But if Trump becomes president, the Republican Party believes a lot about family. And for me, that is so critical, family. And it's during Donald Trump's time that, you know, prayer was reintroduced in schools and that kind of stuff. So I prefer the Republicans at any time.
You see,
so I would rather have Trump on board because I think he's safe for the world.
When we talk about Trump for families, what kind of empathetic heart or spirit or attitude does he express when he calls others animals, yet they're Americans? By legal means, citizens, or by other means. Now, when you have that kind of attitude, these are families you're actually referring to, people in a family you're referring to as animals. What kind of respect would you claim that he's having? Save for maybe the Caucasians, maybe those could be his favorite. And that's what I'm saying, the Caucasians are the ones they call the whites. Save for the Caucasians, maybe they could be having it better than what would be for the Africans and Hispanics, who actually make a large number of the voters statistics of the US. So with that one, I think I wouldn't see him from that perspective. I wouldn't also call him religious, because
he definitely is not religious.
Because if the scriptures do not tame his tongue and his attitude and spirit, I think I can't see him from that perspective.
The beauty about American politics is that it's run by party, so that political parties are known for what they stand for. So as a president, he cannot vacate the ideals of the party. So irrespective of who you have at the top of the Republican Party, there are things that the Republicans stand for that you don't vacate. It's what makes them Republicans.
You see, the opinion of the who is who of this world, and especially of the US, they have a greater say on which direction America takes, and who takes up the seat. Besides now seeing an institution like the Electoral College, which has more power than even the American voters, and I wonder where the democracy is, where the majority carry the day, because the 500 plus, I think 536 members will sit down, as a matter of fact, and discuss the fate of Americans. They might say, I think we need Donald Trump for the foreign policy. While Kamala Harris is actually more on the local interest, the housing, affordable housing, you know, because remember, Kenya emulated or borrowed from the America's bottom-up strategy. And that's why you could see President William Ruto and Joe Biden actually leading very well. But Kamala Harris has taken a diversion of the foreign policy and chosen to address the immediate needs of the Americans. And you know, there is a crisis in America, economic crisis. And so when she takes that direction, it means that she might commandeer quite a support. While Donald Trump is worried about his friendship with, with Putin of Russia, Putin could be having interest of reviving the USSR, the former USSR, because that's where breakaways like Ukraine, Yugoslavia, you know, and other countries like Georgia and such,
Yeah.
they actually broke away, Serbia, they broke away from the former USSR. And the major interest of Putin is not really to hit at Ukraine. It is to revive, to bring them, to conquer them, and bring them back to one fold, the USSR. That would not be in the good interest of the rest of the American, even the Pentagon itself. But Donald Trump, who was accused of having, you know, business deals and connections with Putin, those are personal.
Yes.
So it might not really augur well for either the Americans or either countries that depended on Ukraine, now bringing in countries like Kenya. But now it's time. I think with the hardships that are coming around because of the war in Ukraine, and also war in the Middle East, it means that Kenyans and Africans should now begin to see, like God asked Moses, what do you have in your hands? It's time. Don't give out our Turkana oil to the British. Okay, I know. I've just paused to say that I've just paused that it sinks. I want you to sing, and I'm not asking you really. But what I'm trying to say is, it's time. If the Middle East has war, it's time for us to ensure that areas that have got oil in Kenya, we begin now to go for them vigorously. Lamu, go to the northern part of Kenya. Go for gas in Kajiado, Narok here, where we've heard about gas. Go for coal, which we have in Ukambani. It's time that we begin to generate our own energy and also food. Importing sunflower from Tanzania. East Africa Breweries imports more barley from Tanzania than it is, but yet the weather conditions are actually similar to some of the areas that we have in Kenya.
Is there a possibility that, you know, growing barley in Kenya is more expensive than in TZ?
That is where that's what I'm talking about. It's now for the government systems to ease on areas that actually are repulsive to any investor in such whatever. But you see, there is something that's going to continue killing Kenya, choking Kenya. And this thing is called the PPP, the public-private partnership. Anytime you hear there's a partnership, have you seen any shares floated? Like now when we were dishing out the JKIA, have you seen the public shares being floated for public to purchase them?
But
they will end up somewhere. Public-private partnership. Public means whatever is meant for the public is supposed to be floated to the public, like what was demonstrated when we had with the Kengen and Safaricom and others. This is how it was supposed to be. But this time round, the PPP is working for those who have money who can afford. Okay, so we will not have much of this kind of investment. Government channeling such resources to industries which can be given out, and then you own them as individuals who are moneyed. So when you talk about barley farming, when you talk about farming, improving on farming, it means we must channel government resources in terms of finances towards such to cushion us from the impact we suffer from the wars that we are witnessing in Ukraine. You know, the wars that we might witness extending into Israeli-Iraq war, Iran war. And you see, Iraq and Iran are also working towards joining forces. Now, when you go to the scriptures, you go and try and see who are the Gogs and who are the Magogs. These are the end times. The war might not really be ending now. Yes. So it's time for Kenyans to stop thinking, what happens if America takes that direction or America takes this other direction? What do we have with ourselves? That's where Kenya is supposed to be thinking, other than the small politics that have been running around and dishing out Kenya for over a quarter century to an individual. 30 years is over a quarter a century. You dish out to an individual a whole investment that has been under government care since independence.
Yeah, that's very
I'm talking about such.
Yes.
You talk about Chief, it's no longer Kenyan. Talk about electricity, energy, it's no longer Kenya. Talk about tallow, oil, it's no longer Kenya. You know, and you know, these are things that are actually going on. I don't know how we're going to work it out, but what I feel is that Kenya shall start moving forward the day we shall say you cannot own this as an individual alone, because the PPP is all about how much do you have. Whatever you have is what really makes you a real Kenyan. Those who don't have, they will have to suffer. And the gap between the poor and the rich is going to continue growing. I thought this is something that we're going to change with the bottom-up system of, economic stabilization. But I think it's not going to happen in Kenya.
I hold a completely different view, because I'm one person who believes that the responsibility of the government is to create an enabling environment.
Yes, for investment.
Yes, the government will never make people rich. It will never make people rich. There's no way in the world where the government makes people rich. It just creates an enabling environment, and now people come in and trade. And so you will always have this this gap widening. If you look at the way the world is right now, the haves, almost 10% of the top 10% in the world, and close to more than 60 to 70% of the global resources. 10%. In Kenya, around, put it at close to around 6 families. 6 families, with now others joining, own a huge percentage, almost 80% of the resources of the country. So if you look at the global trends, it looks like, that gap will never ever be bridged. The poor will continue being poor, the rich will continue being rich, and at the same time, there are new people joining the different ranks. New people joining the rich, and the rich joining the wealthy.
You see the crippled mentality of a leadership. Because most of the times I don't like really dwelling on institutions, because an institution is just something that is written on a document that is guided by policies and statutes, rules, regulations. That's an institution. But the people who run and implement those rules, those regulations, those statutes, those laws, they must be having a correct attitude. And like I was saying with the Americans, if the president is not empathetic, don't expect the institutions to be favorable to the people who are not really expected to benefit from such. You've seen the police brutality in the US. It's an institution. You get the point?
Yes.
But the institution chooses to misbehave because it is supported. The ones who are implementing have a wrong attitude, a negative attitude towards others. You get the point? So that's why you see this discriminative thing. When you compare what we had with the former third president, Mwai Kibaki, with the same laws that the former president retired, the late Moi used, and also Kenyatta used, you could think that you're living in a new Kenya, where Kenyans were actually running to pay taxes. Why? Because they have seen the need. Kenyans were running towards looking for investment opportunities. Why? Because the one who sat there had a different attitude, and that attitude was actually an attitude that was meant to benefit the people. He opened China, he opened importation, he opened exportation. Remember, there was a time the former president was granted 25 minutes by former US president to go to Kampala and have his audience for 25 minutes. And I remember the president, Mwai Kibaki, told him, no, I have better things to do. He went to look for the better, to actually negotiate for a better market for Kenyan products. And that was in the COMESA meeting. You get the point? Those are the kind of mental mindset I'm talking about. So that person can change. And that's why I'm so much not into the institutions of Kenya. I'm so much into what really the leaders, the individuals who are actually running the institutions. What is their attitude?
All right.
Yeah, that is what we're looking at for this to benefit Kenyans.
Let's switch this.
Yeah.
Institutions. The Supreme Court is basically yesterday celebrated 12 years since it was set up. If you look at this institution called the Supreme Court, do you think it has done good to the country?
There's a reggae song that says, when you look at what is happening, do you see anything to smile about? The Supreme Court, according to the Constitution, is supposed to interpret the law, offer correct understanding of the law, and take charge of electoral disputes of the presidency. But if you make reference to cases that have landed in the Supreme Court for gubernatorial, for parliamentary, for senatorial, the ones which are supposed to end at the Court of Appeal, meaning Court of Appeal is as the final decision, you will find the Supreme Court scrutinizing the bit by bit of the statistics offered in the records of a results of a certain constituency, you know. And that's not the, actually is not a preserve for the Supreme Court. It is for the High Court. The High Court is the one that does all that scrutinization and analysis of what you say, witnesses say, speak here, and all these things. But when the Supreme Court lowers itself to that level, and I'm talking about electoral matters because they've already set precedence on this one, wrong precedence on that one. There is no much to celebrate. When you see, like the recent, what we saw with the impeachment process, and having followed the matter from all the way from the National Assembly to the Senate, that was empowered by the courts. And when we talk about the courts, it must be sanctioned by the Supreme Court for it to act as a quasi-court. You know, if that is the kind of justice Kenyans would expect from Supreme Court, there is nothing to celebrate about. So what I'm trying to say is that the backlog of the cases that we are having right now is getting back.
We're talking about the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court.
But
when I talk about the Supreme Court, yes, the Supreme Court has the Chief Justice in it.
Yes.
And who is the chief? Who is the main boss of judiciary itself? Now, when I talk about High Court and other, I'm talking about them as under the leadership of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is where we have the Chief Justice.
Yes.
Is where we have the Deputy Chief Justice. So what I'm trying to say is they act at that level, but they manage everything else that operates under judiciary.
Your issue is how they've managed the other courts.
Yes, as individuals.
But isn't it supposed to be thus in this way, in that the courts are supposed to be independent, without interference from the Chief Justice, so that if the lower court, magistrate court, issues a ruling that peradventure you are opposed to, you can appeal
in the court of appeal.
Not necessarily, yes, in the higher magistrates court.
Absolutely.
And then if that ruling you're not happy with, you take it to the High Court.
And how does the Court of Appeal function? The Court of Appeal will look at the verdict that has been offered plus every evidence offered by every witness. Yes. It does not need the witness to stand on to take the stand again. It is the lawyers who present that matter to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal with the lawyers in whatever questions discussion that will continue in the Supreme Court. It is over the verdict, the whole case presented to them.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to say is,
do you have an issue with the Supreme Court here?
I have an issue with the Supreme Court when it gets to discussing again the results, polling station per polling station. You get the point. And it happened years back, you know, where some of us were involved, and we could see this happening. And it is at that time people like Joho had their case, gubernatorial matter. taken to that place. And it's a very simple thing. If a court of appeal has called for a by-election, what does it mean? Being the ultimate of electoral dispute from gubernatorial to MCA. If it has called for a by-election, what business does the Supreme Court have? Then somebody runs to the Supreme Court and says, can I continue being in that office until the by-election is done? It is only one ruling, and nobody else comes back to the Supreme Court to spend time with them. Munya was there, Joho was there, Peter Kingara was there, Mary Wamboi was there, and many others who actually took their case, I think Makwere, many others who took their case to the Supreme Court. It tells you one thing, it was not meant to be. So, being the ones who interpret the law, it is to give an order from up there that at this point of court of appeal, make it very clear that once you've made that declaration, you either cease or you continue or whatever. That's what I'm saying. That is the work of the Supreme Court. True. But you see, when it has not worked like that, and they get back to now scrutinizing what was going on, you know, at the polling station, that one lowers them.
Doesn't
and it's a precedent that is already
set. It depends on the prayers that have been issued. You have appealed, but you've issued certain prayers. And the Supreme Court, in granting the prayers, probably has to scrutinize whether what you've presented has evidence.
Let me give you a case scenario.
I'm looking at, look at the jurisprudence. In the minor Kiai case, the minor Kiai case has completely transformed the elections.
It is a transformative verdict that came around.
Has completely transformed the election, so that now we know that the moment you vote at the polling station, the results that are given there are final, in the sense that you cannot change them anywhere, even if there was a mistake. It has to be changed by the order of the court.
See the loophole now. I want you to see the loophole. You've declared the results at the polling station. Then you still allow a law that declares that the declaration of the constituency returning officer is final.
Yes.
If there is any complaints, you just run to the courts.
Yes.
Yet the returning officer is contradicting the results of his own agents at the polling station. That is what the Supreme Court should be ruling over. That if the Form 34, is it Form 34B, declares this at the polling station, party members agree, party agents agree, because they were all present while they were signing and declaring this thing. The returning officer has no business to misconstrue what is already presented to him. He's supposed to make a declaration based on what is there.
What I see already is like you had
and should be held accountable.
You had a bad experience. You had a bad experience with the court, and now it's like a woman who've had a bad experience with her husband, and now determines that all husbands are bad.
Not quite. Not quite.
Yes.
Not quite.
Because I'm looking at some of the rulings that have been made in the past by the Supreme Court.
I'm not saying they've
changed.
I'm not saying that the court system is overly a failure. It's not overtly a failure. The court system has some good in it.
True.
You understand? There's some decisions the court has made correct. All I'm trying to say is the jurisdiction of powers bestowed to the Supreme Court override those of the Court of Appeal, because they are there to interpret what has been going on or passed down there at the High Court, at the subordinate courts, and at the quasi-courts. The Supreme Court has got power to explain this. But you see, the formation of the judiciary is political. It is within a political system. So definitely, finding them play politics some way, somehow, I would still understand that they are also politicians as much as others are politicians. You know, they're only legal politicians, but they are in the legal fraternity, but they're politicians. So what I'm trying to say is that there was a lot of backlog, quite on, especially on cases regarding family disputes, the civil cases especially, and having this introduction of the alternative dispute resolution mechanism, that is one thing that is really working well. But again, I don't know what powers has been bestowed on it to compel the one who is accused, to toe the line. Because somehow you listen to some of the cases, is like most of them end up at the High Court, even after having those 60 days with those with the alternative dispute resolution ADRs. So what we're trying to say is that they should be empowered, empower them more. That it's like High Court sitting outside a tent, but it's High Court. Yes. So whatever powers that are exercised there is whatever disobedience is actually, or contempt is experienced or exposed or displayed in such a sitting, then it means you are actually contemptuous of the judge sitting in a High Court. So that would actually bring most cases to an end. Because eventually you're finding most of them now transiting into the High Court from these alternative dispute mechanisms. But I believe if it would be given more teeth, more power, to bite, then I think that would work.
But what I figure, you're judging the Supreme Court, and mostly so from the president of the Supreme Court. By looking at the entire judicial system.
That's the jurisdiction, or her jurisdiction. Yeah, she operates from oversight of the whole judiciary. She's the boss, or he's the boss. Whoever sits on that position as the Chief Justice.
So if you were to look, if you were to look at former Chief Justice Mutunga, Chief Justice Maraga, and now Martha Koome, how would you rate this? Who actually ensured that the justice system, if you are to rate them, or 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest?
I think with Willie Mutunga, I mean, he brought in quite some transformation, and also towards getting into obtaining the new constitution. And with the experience I had with somebody like the Chief Justice Willie Mutunga on a matter that I was involved in, it just took him an order, and from the Chief Registrar, a document was released that had been held for over 5 years. So what I'm trying to say is that, and you see, I went to him as just an ordinary Kenyan citizen and knocked, I'd like to book an appointment with the Chief Justice. They said, he's right in, walk in and talk to him. That is how simple it's supposed to be. I'm not saying that we keep, storming these kind of offices, but I'm trying to say is just you must be open and ensure that the people sitting under you, they must toe the line, because it just took a phone call and that was it. 48 hours and I'd gotten what I needed. What I'm trying to say is that, yes, I had the power and the guts, the audacity to even speak to the Chief Justice, with all due respect, but there's somebody else who cannot even get to the judge. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have a leader who is strict up there, then it means the system will actually run. The cogs will actually run concurrently and very well as expected. So it's the same thing. So what I'm trying to say is that there are some areas I would expect the current Chief Justice to actually take a stand and make decisions that would be harsh, but to the interest of the people who have granted them, delegated the powers to them, that is the Kenyan citizen, to benefit from the court systems. So Willie Mutunga, for the short time that he had, I would have given him 7 over 10.
7, okay.
I would give Maraga had a potential to transform this country, save for the debate that always humbles them of finances finances from the treasury. That becomes a beleaguering factor. And so Maraga, with what he had in mind, I think I would have taken him to 8 over 10. But I think our current justice, since she's still working out her way and trying to establish her foot, she inherited the seat at a very tumultuous moment towards the end of the former regime and now into this new regime. I think she hasn't yet gotten her footing, but I believe she can be tough as much as she was when she was in FIDA, with FIDA. And I do believe that if she would, not necessarily with that biased mentality that was there for FIDA, now as a Chief Justice, I believe right now, by now I can give her a 5 over 10, knowing too well that she has room and space to improve. Now, even with the case that are being decided here, I didn't expect her to make any much changes, because she's still a Kenyan who would still expect to go to Meru. And if a Meru leader has been elected, appointed, definitely she would reason like Martha Koome and choose not to be so harsh on that one, and maybe push or have anything to do with this law, because she's a Kenyan like any other. Are you
saying that there are possibilities that the justice system was compromised? I know you're talking about.
I mean, we are watching.
I know you're talking about the Rigathi Gachagua case.
Yeah. That exposed much of the rot that could be existing, and I believe if they change for the better, then I think we'll have a better judiciary system. Yeah, but signs of we could be compromised or something, or we don't have to act as per the law. We just have to feel that this is how it should be, and it goes. These are the kind of things that I was saying that, some of this will go by personal conviction.
Okay, but now that you brought the Gachagua factor back in, I've seen the president has come up with the devices, or those people who basically fought him are now designing ways to go back and try and win the mountain. And one of the things they've said is, crying wolf, say that Gachagua is going to be arrested and all that, and then the people who supported Gachagua's impeachment from the mountain come to his rescues. I can imagine the Ishongwas of this world come to his rescue, and with that, they are sanctified by the community. How hard is it going to be to win Mount Kenya for President Ruto?
When you're dealing with cows,
when you're dealing with
cows or livestock, you just put a fence and then make sure there's a channel to lead them into that.
You
funnel them into the next paddock or the next place where you want them to be, if it's a cattle dip or something, where you want them to fall in. You just build a fence. But not with people who are using their brains. Not people who sit down, think, evaluate, scrutinize, analyze, and they come up with a solution. Like the way they sat down, scrutinized, analyzed, and came up with a solution. We will protect you. We will grant you a platform. We will support you. From 2018.
Yes.
And what else do you want? I want to become the president. We'll also give you that one. And we did. Mount Kenya people did. And I'm not saying they're the only ones who elected him, but in large numbers, it actually shocked the world that this is the kind of love that people can show you. The same people you think you're going to come with goodies, they will receive the goodies. But the goodies don't go into their heads, and it won't go into their hearts, because the decision they have made is from their heart. Look at it this way. Having stepped out of the 2007 post-election violence, and 4 years later, President Uhuru Kenyatta appoints you as his running mate come the next elections. And the Mount Kenya say, although the wound is still green, and I'm not saying that he's the one who caused the wound, but he was party to a party that really afflicted the people of Mount Kenya, largely from Rift Valley all the way to Naivasha. What I'm trying to say, and Nairobi and every other part that that community was kind of bedeviled, same community showed mercy, pardon, forbearance, and all these things, and said, our son has made the decision, we will not fight our son. So you're welcome. And a language was coined to convince fellow people of Mount Kenya that this is the way to go. They overwhelmingly voted for him and their son, Uhuru Kenyatta. He worked so well with our president between, within the first term. The second term, they were able to swallow every other opposition and challenge and brought them under one umbrella, that is Jubilee. Okay? Mount Kenya people still fell in that group, in that paddock, and actually ended up supporting him and their son for the second term. Their son kicked him out. Mount Kenya people sat down and said, this is not what we had agreed, son. We had agreed this or that. And to his favor, they graciously chose to support him and backing up all the way and backing up to become president.
Yes.
And after they had muzzled the opposition after taking up the seat, he gave them that back kick. The asante ya punda ni mateke. What do you expect? You expect to find people who are going to sing choruses of hallelujah, which you were singing with them in church while they were working towards building you? It's going to be very tricky. Projects will come.
If they were willing to forgive him, if they were willing to move on, I mean, 3 years is a very, very long time, isn't it? In politics, one day, you can work wonders. You saw what happened when Rigathi Gachagua was impeached. Within 6 hours, there were gazette notices and parliament recalled. So you can imagine what happens in 365 days times 3.
In a nutshell, it's called injustice. And no matter how long it takes, when you have administered injustice to anyone, they don't forget. Until
the individual who suffers it. But now it's not the community that suffers.
Look at it this way, my friend. Look at it this way. To whom was he speaking to in churches and in those areas where he was gaining audience? Was he speaking to one individual, Rigathi Gachagua? No. He was speaking to Mount Kenya people. They gathered to hear him and cheer him on. You get the point? And they're the same people you think you're going to cajole and entice them with some goodies, and they will sing hallelujah and move on. They will sing hallelujah to the things that belong to them. They're the ones who pay the taxes. It's their money. You know, if you go to Nyeri and they're paying back over 1 billion shillings back to the coffers, they know the pain of paying taxes. Yes. If you go to, I'm not saying they don't pay much, but if you go to areas like Marsabit, Wajir, where they only remit around 50 million, which can come from one rich guy's pocket, I mean, and then they end up taking up like 13 billion, you know, I think the tune is different. Mount Kenya people know who they are, and I believe it's going to be very tricky. Uhuru Kenyatta, in the last campaigns, 2012, Jubilee, let me talk about Jubilee.
Yes.
They had set aside some funds. Watu tutawanunua dakika za mwisho. We will do good things for them, good projects. Today, I believe if you go to places like Nyeri, Muranga, I mean, to get into their homestead, I think it's Tarmac and Maram. Tarmac and Maram. And the Maram was actually effectively put on during the last days of the campaigns, because they had realized, I think our people are not with us. So the projects will come, tutazipokea, mali ni yetu, watu wa Mount Kenya, and that's it.
And when it comes to ballot,
and you see why I'm saying we, it's not that I'm not being neutral. It's because we're discussing Mount Kenya, and I've come from Mount Kenya, and I've refused to say that I'm a Kenyan who is just a Kenyan. I'm a Kikuyu who is a Kenyan. So if you ask me about the Kikuyus, I'll talk like a Kikuyu. And you ask somebody who is from Western Kenya who is a Luya, he'll talk a Luya who is a Kenyan. The common denominator is that we are all Kenyans. You get the point?
Yes.
So it's nothing like negative tribalism. That's positive.
Okay.
Yeah, we embrace each other.
Your closing comments?
Well, I think there is room for change for the judiciary and improvement and correction. But you see, I don't know what they do when it comes to a precedence that has been set, because it acts as an authority in any case that comes around. And I believe maybe there'll be some transformation, and also encourage them to continue giving that hope to Kenyans who have their matters with them. I'm also urging our president to ensure that shift works, because it is so sad. Like, we have been blaming every member of parliament that anytime you come in, you don't complete the projects that you found. Yet they were established in the presence of the people for the people. And then you come and start a new one before finishing this one, and you start a similar thing, and only say that mine will have some black paint, this one had white paint, and these kind of things is what we're trying to we want us to avoid. And that's what I'm saying. If the leadership would be so tough on the other political leadership, then I think we will be able to benefit the Kenyans. Okay. What happens in the United States of America is our business, but not so much a business that would really cause us not to experience any peace or sleep. Let's go and enjoy ourselves, but begin to think, what do you have in your hands?
All right.
That's the conclusion. That Kenyans have got a lot that can sustain them throughout the years without looking up to them. But when we make them more demigods, then that becomes a problem.
It becomes a problem.
It becomes a problem.
All right. And with that, we bring the curtains down on the show. Remember, the judiciary is so key in this country. If we have a principled, law-abiding judiciary, then you can almost predict how your case is going to go, because one of the characters of law is that it's supposed to be predictable. As in, if I kill somebody, I should know that these are the sentences that I'm facing. So it's supposed to be predictable. So we pray for the Supreme Court 12 years down the line. Let's pray that the future is going to be even brighter, as you said, jurisprudence for this country. Don't forget, at 9, we have Your Faith Today with Reverend Felix Kavoy. He'll be hosting a group of very interesting ladies and gentlemen, talking about quite a number of things that affect their people. With that, have yourself a lovely morning.